everyone, today I'm going to show you how to make Phulkas, which is a kind of chapati which you inflate directly on the gas stove. So you do need a gas stove for this. This is a kind of unleavened Indian bread. So here I've got 2 cups of wholemeal atta, which is chapati flour. This is a bit more finely ground than regular wholemeal flour. And I've got some water, roughly about half a liter, but we won't need all of it, and half a teaspoon of salt. So I'm going to start off by making the dough, which is relatively simple. So I'm just going to add little bits of water at a time. Sorry, I should have added the salt as well. Mix that all in. Add little bits of water at a time till you sort of start forming a softish dough. And the idea is that it should be quite malleable, not too hard, not too soft. And some people like to add a teaspoon of oil to this as well, but I don't usually bother. Why add more fat than you're needing? And it just works just as well without any oil in it. So just add little bits at a time. If you can see what I'm doing here, and use a wide pan for this, because it's easier to work the dough, because you're going to have to knead it for a few minutes to release all that lovely gluten and make the chapatis nice and soft. So I'm going to do this with one hand because there's not a lot of flour here, but if there was more I would be using 2 hands. So you can start using your fist like that to sort of work it in. And at the end of the process, you shouldn't have anything left in the pan. It should all sort of wipe it up. Now this is the stage where you've got to be quite careful. Don't put in too much. And I'm just going to now, if you can see, it's like that. And I'm just going to knead it till it becomes so less lumpy and smooth for a few minutes. Just wipe up the sides, get it in there, punch it a bit. But this is the fist method is how I remember people doing it when I was a kid, and my mum as well. So I'm going to use both hands now just to get it a bit, working it in a bit more. You can see the pan is getting quite clear now, clean on the sides. And now I'm going to just leave this for a bit with a damp cloth over it, and I'll come back in about 10 minutes and start making the Phulkas. Now we're going to start making the Phulkas, and I'm going to show you what equipment you actually need for making these. First of all, the most important thing is a tawa, which is, I've got quite a heavy one. This is at least a couple of kilos, and it's cast iron. If you haven't got that, obviously use whatever you have, the heavier the better, and a sort of flattish pan. I'm going to switch this on straight away so that that's heating up while I explain the other equipment to you. Then you need a bit of flour for dusting while you're rolling them. You need a pair of tongs to handle the pulka when it's on the fire. You need a rolling pin. This is an Indian balan, which you can actually buy in Asian shops, but use any rolling pin you have. And this is a chakla, or the surface on which you roll out the chapatis, but actually you can use your kitchen surface as well. It doesn't really matter. So I'm going to start off now. So pinch a bit off, and this comes with practice because you want to make them of a relatively even size. But if you're concerned about the differing sizes, then you can sort of pinch off a few of these balls at once, or roll it into a log and cut off balls, whatever you find easier. But every time you take a bit of dough, work it in your hands like this so that you smooth out all the edges. You don't want any cracks visible on the surface. That's quite important, because when you roll it, it should be very smooth. So I'm going to dunk this straight into the flour here, get a bit on here, and just turn up the gas under this because we want this pan, the tawa, quite hot. So roll this out, and here's very important to roll it out evenly. Now I'm doing it so that it spins at the same time, but you don't need to do that. You can just pick it up and flip it like that. Dust as necessary if it starts sticking to the surface, and roll it in as circular a shape as you can. The most important thing is to get the edges thin. You know, because what often happens is that you roll in the middle and then the edges become thick. So roll this quite thin, I'd say to about, oh, I don't know, about a millimeter or so in thickness. And then you're going to plop it onto the tawa. Now, what I was taught was that you pick it up like this, and the top where you've been rolling should go onto the tawa. So you go like that. And while that's cooking on one side, you start off with the next one. Now, so again, dip it in here. Keep an eye on that because you'll start seeing bubbles appearing on the surface. That's the thing to watch out for. And try to keep the use of the dusting flour to a minimum because it burns on the tawa. And if it does burn on there and creates a kind of black powder on the surface, just brush it off, because otherwise it'll stick to the next phulka. Okay, so now flip this over. If you don't want to use your fingers, you can use the tongs. And as you can see, there's just slight sort of brownish marks starting to appear on the surface. And you can pick this up with the tongs and start to have a look underneath. It's still not quite done. This tawa wasn't as hot as it should have been. But you need to make sure that it's not too hot. So if you have a look at the flame, it's kind of, well, it's a sort of high-medium flame. I think that's the best way to describe it. Okay, so now you see that there's some activity and it's starting to puff up a bit. And you have another peep underneath. Yeah, you see the little brown dots starting to appear there. That's very good. Give it another couple of, like 2-3 seconds. And now we're going to pull this off the flame, like so. Take this and flip it again on this side. So it goes woo, like that. And then give it a couple of seconds. Now give it a couple of seconds here. And that's the phulka done. And ideally, you should brush that with ghee as soon as it's done.